Welcome everyone. Thank you for tuning in. So, my name is Sunil Bhatt, and I work as an associate partner at MSc MicroSave Consulting. Currently, I'm traveling. I'm in Dhaka as I ask these questions to our panelists. So today's webinar is on democratizing entrepreneurship, and simply put, how do we create and support more and more entrepreneurs in India? I think that's the moot question for us. And this webinar is a part of the social media campaign, which is run by the Financial Inclusion Lab in India. Let me give a brief background of the lab. The Financial Inclusion Lab is a part of the BII program, which is run by CII.co. And more specifically, the FI Lab, as it is known as, it's an accelerator program. We started it in 2018, and MSc and CII.co of IIM Ahmedabad. So both of us have sort of supported and incubated more than 50 odd startups in the last 5 years. And these startups have built solutions primarily for the Bharat segment, or the low and middle income segment, people who earn between $2 to $10 per day. And this lab is possible because of funding from different international organizations like the JP Morgan Foundation, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, MetLife Foundation, Omidyar, and MSDF. So we thank them for that. At the lab, we support startup entrepreneurs to grow and reach out to more and more low and middle income entrepreneurs through their tech-based solutions. And even if you look at the Indian government as well, so the government has supported multiple programs on entrepreneurship. I mean, so many names: Startup India, Stand Up India, Mudra Yojana, Atal Innovation, Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana, so on. Like so many of them, and even the private players are also actively kind of promoting entrepreneurship through one way or the other. So today's webinar is basically to look at some of these measures and see what more is needed to push the envelope. And I mean, the word entrepreneur, as you know, it's a French word which was coined by Jean-Baptiste Say, and as early as in 1850s or so. And even before that, entrepreneurs existed, but ever since that, I think the governments in multiple countries have been focusing on supporting, because these are the engines of growth. And may contribute majorly to the economies. So, and when it comes to entrepreneurship, we cannot not talk about the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, the GEM, which is one of the largest international projects that ways, which landscapes entrepreneurship in multiple countries. And as per the GEM report of 2021-22, the total entrepreneurship activity rate in India, it increased to about 14% in 21, and it slightly fell to around 12% or so in 22. And this is up from 5% during the COVID days in 2020. And established business ownership has also increased from say 5.9% during the COVID days to around 8.5% now. Just to put things in perspective, when we look at some of the other middle income countries like say Panama, Chile, Guatemala, all these. So India is somewhere in the middle. So these guys are leading at around say 30 or 40%, which essentially shows that entrepreneurial activity is much more. So with this brief background, let me introduce our eminent panelists for the day. So we have Mekin Maheshwari from GAME, Global Alliance for Mass Entrepreneurship. So GAME unlocks mass entrepreneurship in India. So Mekin is the co-founder of GAME, and he's extremely passionate about discovering entrepreneurship and kind of innovating more and more in this space. So he has also started Udyam Learning Foundation, so I'm sure he'll be talking about it as well. So before this, Mekin is belongs to Flipkart that way. So he was the head of engineering, and even before that, I think he had a couple of startups as well. So that was a tech guy, I would say. Coming to Ajayta Shah, she's the founder and CEO of Frontier Markets. Frontier Markets is a social e-commerce platform specifically for rural households, and Frontier Markets works with SHG women, and they offer high quality, climate friendly, and gender inclusive products to women. Ajayta has more than 2 decades of experience in microfinance, rural distribution, marketing, and other areas as well, right? And as of now, I mean, she is also a part of the financial inclusion lab, one of the cohort members. And finally, we move to Deepti Rahul. Deepti is the MD and CEO of V Hub, the Women Entrepreneurship Hub of Telangana, and it's one of its kind program in India and even in the world, I would say. So Deepti is the Deepti has worked in the US for long and worked with some of the major technology companies like Nokia, Palm, Qualcomm, and others. And when she came back to Telangana, India in 2016, she started off as a joint director of electronics department, and post that she took up this role. And whenever we meet her, so I think she talks very fondly about women entrepreneurship. So I think today we'll hear more about it as well. So thank you all for your time, and welcome you all to this webinar. So let me start with you, Ajayta. The first question. So I think you are a part of the FI lab, right? And we are also working with you as part of the Grow cohort as well. So the FI lab kind of supported you and Frontier Markets as an institution. And here as an entrepreneur, you received different kinds of support, which the lab had curated specifically for startups. So now this is one type of startup. Now at the other level, you are closely working with rural entrepreneurs and whom you call as Sahelis. So that's a different breed of entrepreneurs altogether. So these are women from SHGs. They also have aspirations. They are also usually entrepreneurial. So just wanted to understand your view on the differences between both types of entrepreneurs. And if you could like talk a little bit more about your model as well.
Sure. Thanks so much, Sunil, and hi, everyone. Thanks for having me on this really important topic, I think. So happy to be here. So let me maybe start with what we do at Frontier Markets, just more holistically, just so that we can then center that around the support that we had as an entrepreneur, and then, of course, how we see women entrepreneurs in rural India. So Frontier Markets was created on a very simple premise. It was that there are 700,000 villages in this country. There's over 800 million people in this country that are just not accessing quality services, and people aren't reaching them or understanding them to really help curate solutions to help build a better life. So we call it Saral Jeevan. And we fundamentally believe that the best way to get products and services to where people live at their doorstep would be by doing two things. One, investing in the right facilitator to actually make that connection happen between rural households and services. And the second was to put it on a tech platform. What we learned very quickly was that the best facilitators in the country are women, simply because the SAG women in the country, ultimately, as you rightfully said, are not just only aspirational, but they're very entrepreneurial and fundamentally hungry to earn income, and actually are equally impact oriented as they are in terms of the work they do. And I think that's a really important, alignment between me as an entrepreneur and our Sahelis. We decided to set up a company that would not just give returns or make money, but also very significantly create value in the villages that we're operating in. And I think this is something that's really important to understand about where we see rural women entrepreneurs as well. They're not interested in doing work that will not help them build a reputation, will not help them leverage aspirational outcomes for their communities, because it is a reputation at the end of the day. And it is also about leadership and impact that they can create on the ground, which I think is very critical to understand how these things operate. What we learned, however, though, and I think this has been a classic challenge that I think sometimes we forget, is that, rural women, just like, frankly, I think many of us women in general, we don't just have a single job, right? We have multitude of things to do. We are mothers, we're homemakers, we're farmers, we're community leaders. So when you think about the number of hours that actually rural women have to take on a quote unquote entrepreneurial activity, it's not more than a few hours a day, realistically. And then if you think about where their sphere of influence actually lies, it's not all over the entire country. It's actually where they live. And a lot of times what we've seen is that the limitation on creating village level entrepreneurs when it comes to women is either the program was designed not keeping these things in mind, i.e., in order for this woman to earn true income, she needs to work 10 hours a day, which is not realistic. Or two, she needs to travel to multiple villages to then actually build her customer base to actually then earn money through the business that she does, which again is not real. And so fundamentally what we've seen is that there's been a challenge in product design, the entrepreneurial business model design versus who these women are. We address that by actually making sure that Sahelis can work from where they live. They can use their smartphone and actually connect to the community that they have the most influence over. And then using data, curate and customize solutions so that you can see direct impact well. Secondly, ensure that we understand them as assets, because they truly are assets to connect you to rural customers, so that everything that they do, they should get paid for, which I think is something that I think we tend to forget in terms of how we look at designing the program. So why we have 26,000 active Sahelis today that have not left our platform and that are actually earning 5 to 10,000 rupees a month is because we designed a model that what they call is a settled Jeevan job, right? Aram ki zindagi, to work from home, to be able to create that influence. So earning that money, having that consistency, seeing value in what they're actually offering into that village and building their reputation, I think has been really important. Link that to then what we've done at the FI Lab, it's not different. Honestly, what I think that as an entrepreneur, it is really important for us to understand what our value systems are. What is it that we actually need help in? And giving us a choice, design, a customized, basket of services, I think has been critical. So even with the FI Lab, right? I mean, what was interesting or unique about Frontier Markets joining the lab was we were not a traditional fintech, right? We were not designing a financial service product. But because we wanted to come in as an aggregator and we wanted to come in as a connector to connect to rural markets, what was interesting was that we designed a customized solution with the FI Lab to say, how does a Frontier Markets benefit from these services? And I think anytime there's been an opportunity, I think we, especially with MicroSave, have co-designed, I think, opportunities that we think would be relevant. Last thing I'll say is that one thing that's always common, I think, for both sides of entrepreneurs is any intervention that one is doing, you want to see an ROI. And that ROI typically needs to be a combination between skilling, speed, capability enhancement to do work, and most importantly, revenue or money coming in. And I think that's not different for a rural entrepreneur, let alone being a social entrepreneur or any entrepreneur, frankly, that is actually getting support coming in from the ecosystem, because we have bills to pay and we have work to do. Thanks.
Right, right. No. And I think you make some very valid points here, and I think a lot of it is also kind of very much applicable to even male entrepreneurs as well, in addition to the women. So just had a follow-up question on that, Ajayta. Like, I mean, working with women entrepreneurs that too in rural areas, and your areas are like Rajasthan and UP, right? I mean, one of the toughest areas to kind of operate in. So how are you kind of motivating? Because I mean, MicroSave itself conducts a lot of researches in these areas, and even having even conducting a research with with a male moderator becomes extremely challenging once we kind of get into like the rural areas there. I mean, people would not even like want to talk or really want to open up, or they would be accompanied by their sons or their husbands who make decisions for them. So I think it's extremely difficult. So just wanted to ask a hypothetical question. So if Sahelis were replaced by someone like, say, a Sahayak, right, like a male person, so would this model still work for you?
It's a great question. So I do think a lot of times people assume that if there's a Saheli, there is no Sahayak, that there is no family support. I actually think that, so I'll say two things or three things, right? So one is, I do think that the work or the efforts that have been put in by SAGs and NGOs, like government SAG initiatives, as well as the NGO efforts on social empowerment in these areas, has drastically shifted the cultural norms, I think, in the villages versus 10 years ago. Like the parda element was always there, but because of the SAG work, because of the group collectives, women have started leaving their homes. That's not our doing. That is honestly, I think, an ecosystem play that was already starting to get set up. Because these women are earning immediate income, which I think is very powerful, right? That actually has enabled their importance to rise. And suddenly you see husbands participating or like, sons participating because they see value in joint family income coming in, which again, I think has been a shift. Earlier, it used to be single breadwinners or neutral families. That I think has been a big difference to kind of ensure the sphere of influence rises. Lastly, I'll say you cannot replace the Saheli in what she does. So I think one thing that's really important is to understand that women have structurally created trust in their society in a way that frankly no male can actually replicate. Women can enter into anyone's house. They can ask any complicated question. And the fact of the matter is that because they're so aware of what's happening on the ground, no one can lie to them. In fact, I'll give you a very quick data point because we've been doing a lot of survey work and supporting MicroSave to Dahlberg and others recently. When a Saheli has a smartphone in her hand, the number one toughest question that most survey companies cannot get answered is asking a woman how much money she earns, right? It's a number one outlier question.
Right.
When a Saheli comes in and she's known her 50 households for 3 decades, usko sab pata hai. She knows exactly how much has someone earned, who has sent what money, what dowry is coming in. So you actually cannot even lie to her, right? She'll call you out. So I think there's something very powerful of the role that women play as connectors, influencers, insight gatherers, and trust builders that cannot be replaced.
Right. Yeah. So in short, I think Sahelis are very much important for your
critical
for your business. Yeah.
Yes.
Critical.
Yes.
Yeah. Thanks. Let me move to Mekin. I mean, if you look at the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor report, right? The recent one was 2021 one. So it says 63% of country's population perceives that they know someone who has recently started a business, right? This was a survey done with around, I think, 3,000 odd entrepreneurs, right? 83% of them say that there are very great opportunities for us to start business in our locality. 86% feel that they have the skills to start a new business, right? So great numbers, 63, 83, 86. But 54% still have fears of entrepreneurship. So they feel, what if I fail, right? So that's the resounding thought that they have. And only 18% have entrepreneurial ambitions, right? So that's like really like very poor. So if I compare it with another BRICS country, like say Brazil, it's about 53%. So Mekin, the question is like, how do we, I mean, what is it that you do in game and also in Udyam uh, about innovative entrepreneurship programs? So how do you sort of inculcate this so that as a whole we can look at that 18%? Because as far as technology is concerned, I think India has done a lot. The India stack and other things, infrastructure is also good, uh, and connectivity is also good. So I think the ingredients for entrepreneurship are there, but when it comes to entrepreneurial ambitions itself, right, people are not very sure. So just wanted to understand your views on how is it that you do it differently at Game.
Yeah, thank you, Sunil. Thank you for having me, and good afternoon, everyone. Actually, before I jump to talking about Game and Udyam, maybe I'll share some of my own thoughts and reflections about why the numbers that you shared, the 18% entrepreneurial motivation, etc., might be the case. Yeah, I think it'll be useful to think of, can we think of a single movie where an entrepreneur is a hero? Guru is probably one.
Yeah.
Right? But if you think of
Yeah.
an entrepreneur's portrayal in media, in movies, which are a representative of our society or a reflection of our mirror to our society, or for that matter, our laws, right? They're all written with a significant amount of suspicion towards the entrepreneur. Uh,
Right.
You go back to, so I work a lot in schools, and hence I go and talk to students about their aspirations, their ambitions. And typically it is one person in a class of 40 in a typical government school in 10th grade, 12th grade, who has entrepreneurial ambition. Majority ambitions are around, if I'm doing this in UP or Bihar, it is a government job. If it is in rural Karnataka, it is an IT job in Bangalore. If it's in Kerala, it's a bank job, right? But what we think of and consider as success are jobs, right? And I think we should be mindful and aware that this isn't necessarily a judgment on the people. It's just where we are, right? That the inequality and the insecurity that a large part of Indian population has to deal with, for them, this sense of basic safety and the hope that a government job might give you that basic safety is an important aspiration. The sad part, though, is that a lot of these aspirations do not get real world feedback. So, for example, between 2014 and 2022, about 22 crore applicants applied for government jobs, and 7.23 lakh got them. So 21.93 crore applicants who applied for government jobs and on an average prepared for 3.5 years or 3 years and a quarter, like कि अच्छा किसी तरह सरकारी नौकरी लग जाए, right? Has been our largest aspiration for the youth of the country, right? And I think it's important to keep that at the back of our minds when we think about why might the entrepreneurial ambition be low, right? We are living in a culture, and we've continued to profound that hey, being a government servant is great, and it is, right? But should that be the only ambition, and is that our largest ambition? Is important to keep at the back of our minds. I'll quickly talk about what we do at Udyam, or what we're trying to do at Udyam, to try and build entrepreneurial mindsets at an earlier age. So we work with state governments across 10 states to build what we call an entrepreneurial mindset curriculum. So both in classroom and with real world projects, students getting exposure to thinking entrepreneurially, right? Of problem solving, of independent and critical thinking, of experimenting, of not giving up when faced with a challenge. Those are the learning outcomes that we work towards. And this comes alive in terms of like students doing a real world business project. I think the most exemplary or the most known project that we worked on is the one that's happened in Delhi, where the Delhi government has given every child in 11th and 12th 2,000 rupees as failure money to go build a business project in groups of 1 to 10, right? You come up with the idea, you go do market research, you figure out what problems do you want to solve, and over the next couple of months, build something and try and sell, and go through the experiences of what it might be like to actually build a business, or at least build a business project with the safety net of a school. Right? That if failure does happen, this is failure happening with in a safe situation with your buddies and friends. Like I am very, very optimistic about this project. I am biased. Right. There is, but similar stuff happening now across 10 states. I feel just the exposure of getting to know that, oh, this is what it takes to buy and sell. This is what money is. This is what work is. Because our education system does not give experiential exposure of either work or money or working together in a team to our young people. Right?
Right.
And I think post this, for example, we've asked the question around entrepreneurial ambition, and it's gone up from about 15 to 20 when we do the baseline to about 50 to 60 after students have done a business project, right? Across states. So I think that's one possible intervention, right? That can help students get exposed. And this is not like, I feel exposure is important because I'm a Marwadi. All my cousins are in business, right? And for a lot of other community, for a lot of other friends that I know, that if you're not a PhD, you are seen as a failure in your community, right? So just the fact that different communities have different exposures, different sets of expectations from people that nudge and push them, is important to understand and realize and know that, hey, if you can expose young people to being more entrepreneurial, they may go on to be a government servant like Mr. Varghese Kurian, and yet create an entrepreneurial entity like Amul, right? Or Mr. Sridharan and create Delhi Metro. So being entrepreneurial doesn't necessarily mean starting up your business, right? But like taking life by its horns and driving change in wherever and whatever you're doing. So that's one example of what we're doing that might address this. But let's face it, we're a country with culture and norms built around obedience, around followership, around listening to our elders and following the line and systems. So I think this cultural shift of being more independent, of experimenting, of questioning the norm that an entrepreneur is expected to do is non-trivial for us as a country.
Right. No, I think that's right. I think and also I think the age at which it's done is also important, right? Like they say, you cannot teach entrepreneurship in business schools, right? So maybe by the time people come to business schools, it's already over, at least for a majority of them, because you don't see a lot of B school guys opening up, at least in India, their own ventures, right? So maybe the experiment which you are talking about, maybe it should start as early as, I don't know, maybe 14 or 15 or so.
We work in the 14 to 20 age group. I think there is evidence. I do disagree a bit with what you said that B schools cannot, because there are global B schools that did actually experiment with students trying to do their own business projects and saw a significant jump in the number of people for pursuing entrepreneurship. HBS did that. Professor Tarun Khanna actually instituted some of that and so on. So I think there are case studies around formal business schools attempting, but I think the key is that entrepreneurship cannot be taught theoretically. It's like swimming.
Right.
You can teach all the theory of swimming, but if you don't have a pond, if you don't allow them to experiment, and maybe having a safety net where you will not drown, can help people actually learn entrepreneurship versus them having to be thrown in the ocean.
Right. Yeah. Sure. So we'll come to what's required of the government and of other institutions to do it towards the latter part. So thanks, Mekin. So let me move to Dipti. Dipti has been predominantly working in the V Hub and facilitating sort of women entrepreneurship. And when you look at numbers, we see that women entrepreneurs face a lot of hardships as compared to their male counterparts. Like even if you look at the World Bank Findex data, 15% of women are 15% less likely to have bank accounts at a formal financial institution. Women are 20% less likely to have borrowed from a financial institution as compared to males. Even when you look at the financing gap itself, it's much higher at women's level. And even if you see at some of the research conducted by, say, a European investment bank, which says women-led startups are very rare globally. And at the lab as well, at some point of time, we wanted to find women-led startups, and we were like really looking for people in India, very, very few actually. And evidence from even advanced economies also talk of disparities between male and female entrepreneurs, right? In India, it's much higher. So Dipti, you work with so many challenges with women entrepreneurs. So can you talk a little bit more about your experience of working with them, with both the women startups as well as low income women entrepreneurs at
Yes,
the WeHub?
thank
Yeah.
you so much, Sunil. And it's fascinating to hear Ajayta as well as Megan speak about their insights into entrepreneurship. So coming down to what we do, number one thing is that all the data that you quoted is absolutely right. And as somebody who's not an entrepreneur, somebody who's not ever worked in government, and somebody who's not even from, who's not had any, doesn't even have an MBA, it's quite fascinating for me to actually dive headfirst into almost like a 3 feet pool, right? So that is how I felt when I started working with women entrepreneurs. And over the past 5 years, the first learning that I've had is that we often, one of the biggest challenges for women entrepreneurs, and I will say women entrepreneurs here specifically, is because a lot of times we equate entrepreneurship with empowerment. And that is where I think we are actually missing the boat. The reason is when we talk about women, there is a certain perception that we always need to empower them. So first is, I think, an internal bias that exists with us that, even if we do the smallest of thing, we think that we've done a lot. So that has been one of the biggest learnings, at least for WeHub, is that when we talk about empowerment, it is not just empowerment and entrepreneurship cannot be used interchangeably. But yes, is entrepreneurship a way for economically enabling these women to have an effect on all the other pillars of empowerment? Like, can they make better choices on like health? Can they make better? Can they have their voices heard? Can they actually speak up in certain forums? So all these pillars are affected by entrepreneurship, and that is where I'll start my conversation. Because when you quoted all these numbers, one of the biggest challenges is, please do not equate entrepreneurship is equal to empowerment. We are definitely economically enabling women is going to bring a lot more, I will not say value, a lot more amplification of their voice, even at the family table, and they can make better choices for themselves. Now, coming down to what are the challenges that we often see women entrepreneurs facing? Number one, lack of awareness of what exists. The reason I say this is because there are like a lot of schemes that are available in government itself, right? If you look at the CGTMSE scheme, we look at PMEGP, we look at so much. They all exist. In CGTMSE, you can get a credit linkage up to 2 crores without collateral, but not a lot of entrepreneurs know about it. Because what happens is that they do not have the wherewithal to create their project proposal. Right. So what we are doing is making sure that they understand that, yes, 2 crores is available, but you do not need 2 crores. Maybe you can start with a certain amount of money. And how do you understand your DPR? That is the first thing that that is one of the first challenges. Financial understanding, financial discipline, and access to government schemes. That is the first challenge that we've noticed. And the second thing also is that when you spoke about the, financial training and all that stuff. See, the biggest challenge that we often end up seeing is that, especially in women entrepreneurship, we often see is that a lot of times we are starting an initiative, and let's say it is not for women from a slightly disadvantaged socioeconomic background, but even in the more socially upward kind of programs as well, we notice that we are doing a large scale program, and suddenly somebody realizes we do not have enough gender diversity here. So let us actually say we are creating a separate program for women, and it is just the same program without a lot of change that is offered to the women entrepreneurs as well. See, one of the biggest things is we need to make sure that it is not a diversity pick when we work with women entrepreneurs. The reason I say this is because when we take something and we kind of try to say, Acha, you're also women, please join in, because it is looking very one-sided. Then what happens is that a lot of times women, a lot of times women are not aware that these programs exist. By the time they apply, they're not selected into it. And, usually the same people are seen everywhere. That is the second challenge, lack of access to this kind of training and all that. And last and most important thing that oftentimes we notice is that the risk averseness, because a lot of times entrepreneurs, when you look at it, especially women, they have actually been through so many different circumstances to arrive at the starting point. By then, their fight is already almost at a point where they have defied so many things to be there. By then, their firepower is almost like somewhere else. And they need somebody who can amplify them faster to say that, Acha, you've done so much. Now let's just get cracking. So I think these are broadly, I know I can get into the specifics of why this and not that, but I think these are the, but one request I have and again, I speak as the CEO of WeHub, right? Somebody who's heading the only women entrepreneurship, incubator in the country by a government. I'm often asked, I call myself as a leader, not a women leader. I call myself as an engineer, not a women engineer. And then I'm often asked, then why are you heading WeHub? I realize because, if we do not have WeHub, we can't have these kinds of conversations in these kinds of forums. And that is why WeHub exists. Broadly, that's about it. Otherwise, yeah.
No, I think you make some important points. I mean, just a follow-up question on that is, I mean, like Ajeta works in UP and Rajasthan, where I think largely patriarchal societies, right? A lot of decision making is done by the male for the female. So how has been your experience here in Telangana, especially say if you look at the northern districts of Adilabad and the northern ones. So has your experience been similar, or because south they say south of India is they say is, women are more empowered that ways and they take their own decisions. So what has been your experience of uh,
Yes,
working? Yeah.
interesting question. So as you are aware, Sunil, a lot of the SSG movement and I mean, you are from the country which actually originated everything, right? Right now you're in that country. So it has actually in Telangana and erstwhile United AP, we had incredible transformation in women community development by way of the SSG movement. As you're aware, we almost circulate 18,000 crore rupees with a 99.1% return rate through these SSG group. So the foundation has already been laid since 1995. So in a manner, that has actually enabled these conversations to start. Some basic financial conversations to start. But when it comes to the question that you asked, the challenges are still the same. While we may be a little bit slightly forward, end of the day, there is still the unpaid care and the roles that are still there. But the way we are tackling it at WeHub is to make sure that number one, we talk about economics and employment generation. Because unless you put money on the table and make the entrepreneur understand that we are not in it just for being on newspaper or whatever else, we are here to make sure that, if you put in 1 rupee, you're getting 10 rupees back. That is one. Number two, we are also talk about role model creation. See, it is not when you and I agree that, they're a role model. What we do is make sure that, if you talk about the north of Telangana, I'll be honest, in east of Telangana, it's a little bit different. South is very different. West is very different. Each of these places, we make sure that the entrepreneur is highlighted as a role model by way of felicitating her in front of the collector and everybody else. So that what happens is she actually sees that her voice is being heard and she's becoming a role model. And even the family, a lot of the challenges are actually sorted out. So we believe a lot in storytelling, and that is something that has been incredibly powerful. And the second thing which has really helped us is that, when we talk about tier 2, tier 3 parts, a lot of the work has been there in, let's say, in livelihoods or livelihood or self-sustaining or supplemental kind of income activities. So what we are trying to do is that we are saying that out of a group of 100 women, if there are certain women who want to go beyond the livelihood stage, we take them and we make sure that they are becoming entrepreneurs who have a commercial unit where these other women who are looking for supplemental income can come in and work. And that is also supported a little bit of our work, I think. But yeah, broadly, these are two ways, but it's going to take some time for change to happen. But again, I will reiterate the point that unless we bring in the economic sense of entrepreneurship is equal to more than livelihood income, we'll be at this. We often end up calling everything, even livelihoods, as nano micro enterprises, whether they're registered or not. And I think that is where
Right.
change makers like us really need to get together and say that if somebody is making no offense, but if somebody is making 5,000 and 10,000 only and are not registered in a certain manner, then we should not be calling it as entrepreneurship. Yeah, let us call it women in business. What's the problem? The next step is profit making. The next step is entrepreneurship.
So now I have to come in because I have to. I've been like dying to say a few things right now on this because I think that the purpose of this talk is democratization. And I want to make sure that we understand that democratization is about perspective. And it's also about condition and positioning, right? So in my perspective, and I'm telling you this based on from my microfinance days to now, 20 years of spending time across the country, what we fail to understand is that women have choices and they want to decide how much they earn or they don't earn, right? So elevated income and livelihood, part-time work is equally as important. And I think that our challenge as a country has been that we thought that because she cannot get a full-time job of 8 hours working days and traveling and getting like a white collar or blue collar job like her male counterparts, she should become an entrepreneur. And I'm sorry, I'm going to reiterate this, that entrepreneurship is a choice and it is risky and it is tough and it requires 100 other levels of handholding reality checks that we need to understand is not the solution for everybody. If a woman wants to come in and only earn a livelihood and only earn 5,000 rupees and not be registered because she doesn't want to pay taxes, because she has no idea what the reality is when she gets a GST or does like a registration because no one's helping her understand any of this, I say we do not discount her. She's an important contributor to her family and the ecosystem, and it's her choice in terms of what she wants to earn and doesn't want to earn. So I'm sorry, like I had to like say it because I feel like it's really important for us to remember that. Democratization is choice. It's about we are coming in. Who are we? We're coming in saying that I'm going to decide a program for you. I'm going to help you get to a certain level because I believe this is the right way forward as a country, which is, I think, in my opinion, not fair, right? And so I just want to emphasize that point. Sorry, Dipti, I was like, wait, what?
No worries,
like,
no worries, no worries.
Yeah,
I'll be,
like,
okay. Yeah. So totally. I'm sorry, I'm just going to add on to this. So here we are talking about democratizing entrepreneurship, right? So it is not to discount somebody. It is to make sure that we are creating opportunities. And as a government, when we talk about somebody only wanting to not register because they have to pay taxes because they don't know, we have actually made sure that everybody is registered. They understand how to do GST. We work with them. If we get them access to credit, we even work with them on understanding how to do monthly EMI payments. And we only go ensure that, you know, they get access to credit if they are willing to do it. And if they are actually...
I'm just saying, let's not discount someone that earns 5,000 rupees, right?
but
Or wants to do like a part-time job or wants to have a livelihood, right? I mean, there are nano entrepreneurs. They do exist. And I think the fact of the matter is when we talk about financial inclusion, this is one of the reasons why the industry still, despite 1995, we still have underbanked people, right? So that's all I'm trying to say. Like registration, cool. But let's respect what people want to earn.
Again, we are talking about entrepreneurship here. And when we talk about startups and entrepreneurship, if you look at the MSME guidelines today, 100% owned by one woman is called as women-led entity, which is really not the case anymore. A startup can be led by a person, a woman or founder, and she can actually bring in a lot of external funding, right? There are a lot of changes that need to be made. But when we talk about entrepreneurship, we need to be very clear on having different levels, which can all be certainly at least broadly defined, so that people know where they're headed. Otherwise, we will be stuck in this same conversation. And Sunil is like, okay, let me sorry.
Sure. No, I think different views, it's fine. So both of you spoke of capital and Ajit also spoke of microfinance, right? So let me move on this most important point on capital, right? I mean, India is a capital hungry country that ways. I think every report that comes out, be it from IFC or World Bank or any other organization, talks of the credit gap. Like recently, Avendus Capital came out with a thought paper on MSME, and it said the credit gap for MSMEs is 530 billion. UK Sina committee had come out with a number which was half of that, around 250 billion or so dollars in 2019, right? So I mean, this question is for Mekin. Sorry. So the the thing is, I mean, debt is anyways going to be like a most preferred financing option for entrepreneurs, right? And a lot of entrepreneurs, the smaller ones, generally don't get it, and we have seen it during COVID as well. So just wanted to check if there is any innovation possible in this, like pure equity. If you see, I mean, this is largely for bigger players, but there is a concept of micro equity as well. So just wanted to check if micro equity is something which nations like India can think of. Some experiments have happened, but then I mean you know how they have moved. So just wanted your thought. Like is this even a tool for
Yeah.
capital? Yeah.
So yeah, I think I'll again try and broaden the question, right? That like why does money not flow to entrepreneurs who need it, right? Or what is clogging that supply chain of money? And I think we've had at Game, we've had a few experiences of stumbling across a few large issues and being able to throw some light at it. One of the issues that we found was for entrepreneurs to get their own money, right, that bigger companies owe them, can take them as much as 6 to 9 months. Right? So the whole area of delayed payments, right? And just because a small entrepreneur does not have negotiating power, and while there are laws, a larger company can get into loopholes of like, oh, this invoice has this small issue, so send the invoice back and etc. to continue to delay payments. But I think so that is one example of entrepreneurs not having a voice, right? Small business entrepreneurs not having a voice and not being able to represent themselves and fight for what is rightfully theirs. I think on a separate note, there is like we are working with NRLM on a project to help NRLM work with banks to enable individual lending happen for women entrepreneurs. Right. So while there's a significant amount of joint liability group lending that through SHG, MFI, and NRLM has been happening in the country. I think we've talked about that movement. The moment it moves to individual lending, banks use the same old methods of, hey, do you own an asset? And asset ownership for women is extremely low in our country. And despite having significant history of participating in the financial process of a joint liability group model, women do not get access to individual loans for growing their businesses or for doing their businesses because banks don't have methods to be able to assess and understand that, oh, this woman has actually been working with money for 10 years and has done it very regularly. And so I should be able to trust her. So I think that is another piece of work that I'm excited about. But if we zoom out, right, I think our larger challenges are about which are the financial institutions that are actually most capable and closest to small business entrepreneurs to be able to serve them financially. I've spoken to a fairly large number of banks, and both directly and indirectly, they've indicated that the bank model and the structures actually do not allow them to serve small businesses profitably. They're much better off working with much, much larger businesses. So in the MSME, they continue to work with the M, not even the S. Right? It's far easier, and given where India is today, that remains the larger area of focus. NBFCs, right? And there are a large number of NBFCs that are probably closer to small businesses. Today get starved of capital. So about 85% of the money that goes from banks to NBFCs goes to 15 NBFCs, not 15%, but 15 NBFCs. Right? So the top 15 NBFCs get 85% of the money that goes from banks. Right? And then they do, and then they have to add their cost. They do on lending. So by the time it gets to an NBFC that's close to an entrepreneur, the NBFC itself is getting that money at 18 sometimes higher percentage.
Yeah.
And if you add the higher riskiness, you are going to end up lending at 24, 26, 30%, right?
Yeah, but even making, just to cut you, that's not the problem. Even if you give an entrepreneur a loan at say 25, or microfinance has been operating at 24, right? I mean,
Yeah.
25, 30, even yeah.
So
So
what I
they
was
are not
saying was,
getting. I think that's the
this is
larger question. Yeah.
15% of the
Yeah.
money
Yeah.
flow, right?
Right. Yeah.
So I feel like unless we start looking at this as a supply chain of money and starting to unclog this, right? I don't think, because the numbers that you're saying have been staring at us, right? From
Yeah.
as in UK Sena report and earlier, we've known that, hey, MSMEs don't get money, right? Don't get done. I think there is hope in terms of more of flow-based lending that's starting to happen. Early days, I think with the access to data and some of this being available, I am quite optimistic about account aggregator that, okay, there is, as in, again, more data portability and entrepreneurs being able to prove their worth to a banker and do it digitally. So I'm bullish about the direction we are heading in. I am worried about the perceptions. Like, I don't think we've held our rating agencies accountable for the rating of NBFCs that they have created, and how do they work vis-a-vis the actual performance of the NBFCs and the rate of growth. Like, we would want there to be much higher competition. So, for example, an NBFC that chooses to focus on a geography gets rated lower, right? Because of a geographic risk, which is stupid. India is such a massive country, right? But those rules have not been relooked at. And AU is a great example of focusing on one geography and being able to create a beautiful financial institution. And there are multiple other examples of NBFCs and banks that started very small in specific geographies to be able to do this. But I don't think our systems and structures have recognized that. So I feel that we need a system that empowers NBFCs a lot more. We are running an NBFC accelerator with SIDBI and hoping that a bunch of NBFCs which have high potential can grow rapidly and help the others see that, hey, this is possible.
Right. And just a follow-up question: what do you think of these
Sorry, I think
DPIs?
both have had their hands up. I feel like you should go to them.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Dipti, you wanted to add anything?
Yeah, so I mean, very, very, very valid points, right? So one of the things is that while we focus on the bottom of the pyramid and the unicorns and unicorns, the ones which actually have kept India reasonably stable are actually the MSMEs, right? And during COVID, we saw that, as Mekin rightly pointed out, working capital was the biggest challenge, and all the points that he made are super valid. So obviously, we cannot tackle, for us as a small entity in a small part of the government, we could not tackle all those challenges, right? The things that Mekin is speaking about, access to credit and all that stuff. So very simply, what we actually try to do, and when the question I think you asked is around how do you innovate and all that stuff. So what we are actually doing is that during COVID, there was a lot of support, right? There was both state and central governments were trying to support the MSMEs to make sure that, they were staying afloat. And I think certain banks also came forward to support employers who were actually paying their employees in spite of it being closed and all that stuff. What we actually did is that we created something known as V-Bridge, Women Entrepreneur Bridge. And the focus there was very quite simple. So what we did is, instead of trying to say that, we will give you a loan or a grant or whatever else, what we did is that we put aside a certain part of money, very small amount, to make sure that, if some entrepreneur or somebody who actually wants to kind of like, we actually added the bridge kind of thing. Example, if somebody wanted to go digital, but they did not have the wherewithal of sorts to kind of go there, we supported them with a certain small amount of money so that they can actually move their operations online. So we paid about 50% of the money that was needed for them to go digital, create a website. So the second thing is, if somebody wanted to move from one premise to other, we also added a component of rental grant as well. The reason is, if somebody is running a business from home or somewhere else, and if they want to move a bigger premise, they are always, the price becomes a barrier. So if they are able to provide certain amount of things, we are actually trying to bridge. So these are the small interventions, and we were actually seeing that, if you're at a very low scale, we'll give you a higher support grant rather than when you're at a much higher level, right? So that is how we actually created, and we've set aside around, with support of CSR, about 5 to 6 rupees, and that was kind of like reasonably working well. But we wanted to make sure that, this can actually be something that can be sustained and scale, rather than government taking the entire load of ensuring that all this can continue, because there are so many schemes already in government. Again, this is very small, but it has been quite in a manner useful of sorts.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Ajita, you wanted to add?
Yeah, I thought it would be good to even give the examples of the accelerators that we've all been experiencing, right? I do think that like the role that BII, CIIE, FI labs have played in really looking at, I think blended capital is a really important space that we don't talk about enough, right? And that there is a role for philanthropic or subsidized money to come in. For a very long time, we started getting averse to subsidy as a word, right? But actually, if we think about it, the biggest companies have been able to go through growth and innovation leveraging that. And I think that so seeing where incubators can get access to more of this kind of funding. FI did it. We had growth projects. I think what was also interesting is I think the role, so sometimes when we're looking at capital, we only think about capital as either loans or grants or equity. But actually, I think based on many of the discussions that we've had in the past, especially if we look at the entire cohort of startups, they're saying we just want more revenue opportunities, right? And so like I think a lot of the work that now is happening even with iStart and what's happening with Startup India, where the government is trying to make mandates to get more contracts out to startups so that they actually have revenue opportunities to deal with their cash flow, I think is a really big, important effort that needs to be emphasized. Last thing I'll say is that, going to Mekin's point around looking at that value chain, we, as you know, obviously are working on 2 projects actually with you guys, right? One is on, being that aggregator bridge to design better products in insurance, savings, et cetera, for fintechs to be able to see what the economies of scale can be so they can actually leverage a better scale. I think the challenge for a lot of the banks to give money to MSMEs or give money downstream is that if they don't see a large enough market, even if they have that quota, right, that they need to be able to fill for priority lending, it's just not profitable because you don't see that economies of scale. But where's a role that aggregators can play if you can show that there is actually a market of 1 million customers ready for a certain product, and then you need that financing? And I think that's something that I think we can play a larger role in creating as a much larger movement, especially as we think about this with the gender lens, because there is gender priority. And finally, I'll just say the work that we've done specifically with ag finance has been very interesting to see where does NABARD subsidy come in for priority lending for women small farmers, but where does a fintech come in to design the right product and then bring in grant? So like it's a combined product basket to actually help support the entrepreneur. So if you look at the way that Gates or others are talking about women economic empowerment for entrepreneurship, right? It's no longer just capital, right? It needs to be digital inclusion. It needs to be data-driven work. It needs to be market linkage. There needs to be capacity. There needs to be social services. And then, of course, there needs to be capital. So I think like also seeing it as more of a combined effort of intervention to really support at a larger scale will be very exciting. We'll be making a really big announcement next month around our effort to do that for 100,000 small women businesses across Rajasthan and UP. But I think it'll be that effort. So if that's something that we're looking at interesting design, Mekin, we should probably have a conversation longer around that. But there is hope. I do believe there's intention. I think it's a matter of design, right? And I think that if the right people come together of that value chain, I think it's a huge opportunity that we can unlock. And the capital is there. It's just that we don't know how to use it.
Right. Yeah. Mekin, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I think finally, just the question you started with on micro equity, right? Conceptually, the small business entrepreneurs are the one that need risk capital, that need equity capital. Right. But I haven't yet, and I know of multiple experiments, some being run by friends around micro equity with delayed payments, with profit sharing, etc. I haven't yet come across something that can be modularized or created into a model that can then replicate or self-replicate rapidly. I do hope that that happens. I feel like if we can, so
Right.
here is a request to all financial innovators that if we can crack a micro equity model that's easy to implement, that's not too operational, and given the digital payment world we live in, if we can figure that out, I feel like we could unlock significant amount of value with, as in with betting on entrepreneurs who can actually create significant amount of value.
Right. Right. Yeah. Thanks. I think we are already at 5:30. We started 3 minutes late. So just one last 1 minute response from Deepti on V hubs, right? So just wanted your thoughts, like what do you think of replicating V hubs in different states and the kind of success that we have seen in Telangana? So what do you think will it take to replicate a similar thing? And I know you have been working on it, like the T Hub as well, right? T Hub also has been trying to replicate its model in multiple states. So just like a 1 minute thought on what can be done so as to kind of support women entrepreneurship.
Very simply, I think, thank you, Sunil. So we are actually replicating one in a neighboring state and we'll be signing it tomorrow.
Yeah.
So that has
Achha,
been
cool.
long in the works and that's already happening in one of the southern states. And what does it take? Just call us and say, let's do it. And that's about it. I think we don't need to think a lot because we've made a lot of mistakes along the way and we've had a lot of learnings also. But the one thing we are looking at is democratization will not happen if we don't standardize certain things. And unless we have a pyramid kind of a structure on where we should have a path for everybody, right? Whether they choose to or not,
Right.
let them make that call. But we need to show the path for everybody. And that is something that we've been working on. And we hope that we can replicate it. If whoever is interested will be happy to come in and work with them.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks a lot. We had more questions, but I think due to positive time, I think we'll call it a day. And thank you very much for your thoughts on entrepreneurship. Thanks, Ajayta, Mekin, and Dipti for your thoughts on this. And then hope we continue the discussion in some of the forums as well. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Sunil. Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Bye, Ajayta.
Yeah.
Bye, Dipti.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.